way, because of the way our schedules are, we decided, a group of friends decided that, in spite of the fact that he's such a very knucklehead, we all love him and we want to celebrate him because, I mean, why can't we just celebrate each other whilst we're here? So we decided to put this together, and I'm so grateful to everyone that has made this possible. And so we're going to start off because we don't want to waste too much time. We want everything to go by the way we have planned it. For this event, I have a co-moderator. My name is Grace Adinku, and my co-moderator is Uche Peter Omezu. Okay, I got that wrong. It's Uche. Can you please tell?
Oh, yes,
tell
yes, I can hear you. Uche Peter Omezu, okay.
So he's going to be our co-host for the day. But before we start off with all the events, we want to call on our dear Professor Chelozona Eze to officially, open up this event by giving us a welcome remark. Professor Eze.
I have to unmute myself. Thank you very much, Dr. Grace Adinku. I greet you all wherever you may be. It's wonderful to see you all. And in the name of AMA Committee of Friends, I welcome you to this celebration in his honor. I would like to paraphrase one of my favorite poems ever. A poem written about 3,000 years ago in honor of King David. It's Psalm 133. And the original words read thus: "How good and pleasant it is when brothers live together in unity. How good and pleasant it is when friends come together in unity, when they come together not to mourn or yammer, but to celebrate life, especially the life of one of their own. We are all gathered here to celebrate life as it is. I thank our common friend, Amatoritsero Ede, for being who he is to all of us, a true friend. All of us know Ama, and we appreciate him for many reasons that are unique to us. To some of us, he embodies raw life. For some of us, we appreciate him for his authenticity, for his decency, and for his intellect. But I think one thing we all can agree on is that he is a joy to be with. And he's a joy to be with because everything about him is about life. So whenever I think of him, or whenever I chat with him, which I do almost every week, I think of one of my favorite philosophers, Arthur Schopenhauer. This philosopher interpreted reality as a representation of will, the will to live. To see Ama is to see the will, raw will to live, and the love of life in motion. We are all gathered here to do what he loves most and what he inspires in all of us, to celebrate life. We do it the way we intellectuals know best how to do. We are here to celebrate him by paying homage to his mind. We celebrate the life of the mind. And we do it with joy, but also in the awareness of our responsibility, or perhaps of our duty. To be alive is to live in a community and to have friends. And to have friends and to live in a community is to be morally bound to some duties. And to live a meaningful life, we must have people we honor, whether we like it or not. People whose words we respect, whose lives give meaning to ours. And to honor such lives, to honor such people, is to honor ourselves. I therefore invite all of us, friends of Ama, let us honor ourselves in him. Let us celebrate his words. For everything, as Ama the poet will agree, is word, and words are life. Thank you very much. Let's celebrate Ama.
Thank you so much, Professor Ede, for that wonderful welcome remark. At this point, I want to call on our keynote speaker, and I will introduce him. Our keynote speaker is Dr. Tosin Bogi. He is an assistant professor of English in Marquette University, where he is teaching and his research focuses on African literature, race, and popular culture. Before joining Marquette, he taught in the Department of English in Adekunle Ajasin University and worked as an art editor with Nigeria's leading publisher, Craft Books. Bogi is the author of 2 collections of poetry, The Thongs of a Shattered Sky and Locomotive and Other Songs. He is also a co-editor of 1 poem, 50 Seasons in the poetry anthology of the Association of Nigerian Authors. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome with me the keynote speaker for this event, Dr. Tosin Bogi.
Thank you very, very much for the introduction. Is there a way I can share my slide?
Namesake, you're muted.
I'm trying to find the...
Okay, let's see.
I think you should be able to help.
You should be able to, if
Yes.
you look close to the chat button.
Okay,
You
I'll look
see
at
the
it.
green button, share screen. Then if you click on that, you will be able to share your screen. Share your screen, then click on your slides.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that.
Okay.
But the host must give him permission to do that. So the person who is the host, you have to go to the, I think the security settings and give him access.
Okay, the host can do that by...
Yes, but Professor Eze, are you able to do that?
I think...
Let me...
I think the easiest way is just to make him a co-host.
Okay, I think I can. Let me see. Can we see anything?
Sure.
Yes.
Yes.
Sure.
Yes, you're on now.
All right. So thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to come and speak about Dr. Ede's work. It's a real delight to be here. I've known him for many, many years, and we've had interactions about so many aspects of his work. And that's basically what I'll be talking about today. My talk today will focus on both his critical work and as well as its poetry work. I would draw from his biography, and I will use that to speak broadly about some of the most important issues that I've sort of engaged in the last couple of years. I've titled my talk today "On the Fringes of the Word," which is, that first part of the title comes from one of Ede's poems, which I'll be dealing with today. Race, Nation, and Cosmopolitanism in the Writing of Amatoritsero Ede. The critical discourse of cosmopolitanism has had a great run in African studies. From about the late 1980s and early 1990s, when it first exploded in African literary and cultural and philosophical circles, its insights have applied to almost everything, from literature to borders, to nation states, and to vexed questions of identity, projected to capture Africa's place in a fast-changing world and the new realities and identities of a growing network of urban, transnational, and transcultural Africans. African cosmopolitanism maps, as it were, a world cultural citizenship that breaks away from the essentialist tendencies of territorial, racial, and ethnic identities in a world of superdiversity. In some formulations, this world citizenship is thoroughly rootless, free-floating and unmoored, while in others it is both rooted and rootless, local and global, and specific and universal. In this talk, I present broad reflections on the dispersed claims of Afropolitanism, using the decades-long intellectual labor of Amatoritsero Ede, the celebrant in whose name and honor we are gathered here today. I set out to examine how his rich poetry and critical writings have closely wrestled with both the promises and challenges of cosmopolitanism as an organizing discourse for thinking about Africa and Africans in the contemporary world. As many of us may already know, Ede belongs to what is often referred to as the third generation of Nigerian writers. And these writers include figures such as Remi Raji, Sheson Ajayi, Afamake, Lola Shoneyin, Toyin Adewale, Ogaga Ifowodo, Akin Adesokan, among many, many other writers. First, joining the University of Ibadan Poetry Club around 1985, 1986, as Remi Raji remembers it, his poetry was first brought to national prominence through the Harry Garuba edited anthology, Voices from the Fringe. This was in 1988, few years before Ede would leave Nigeria. In December 1994, Ede left for Germany, where he studied and lived for 8 years. In Germany, he continued to pursue his love for poetry and art, while also learning how to read, write, and think in German. In 2002, he relocated from Germany to Canada, where he also studied and founded the popular literary magazine, Maple Tree Literary Supplement. That magazine has published the works of writers from many countries and nearly all continents. It has also featured the writings of both established voices and little-known writers, thus reminding us that the best of writings may be underground, isolated from the rabid and roving eyes of capitalism, stardom, and celebrity culture, all of which increasingly turn literary culture to game and cold rational calculations. By 2016, Ede returned to Germany for a brief writer-in-residence stay. In 2017, he took off again to Uganda, where he taught at the Makerere Institute of Social Research, MISA. And this was where I met Dr. Ede for the very first time, at least in person. From Uganda, Ede touched down in South Korea in 2018, where he worked briefly before heading to Bahamas. From Bahamas, he returned to Canada, in 2020, where he's now currently teaching. I've recounted these journeys not just for because I wanted to, but to suggest importantly that Ede's life supplies the inspirational basis for his poetry and academic work, both of which, I shall argue, foreground the radical limitations of cosmopolitanism for Africans circulating in the world. Of course, as Pa Alualia cautions, quote, there is considerable danger in assuming causal connection between the events of an individual's life and the specific pattern of ideas and assumptions developed in their intellectual work, unquote. Yet, I am also reminded by Odia Ofemo in that corrective polemic reply to Roland Barthes that it is impossible for the African author to die. As Ofemo puts it, quote, writers are not stuck in the groove of existing languages, but can guard it to do what it never did before, including the transgression of existing formalities and pre-existing analogies, unquote. Ofemo's rejection of Barthes' thesis proceeds from a deep historical analysis of the African post-colonial condition, one which demands that one abandons textualism, culturalism, and abstract universalism to attend to specific violent material and political structures that make it impossible for the African author to die. Reconciling and taking seriously Alualia's and Ofemo's seemingly contradictory positions, I read Amatoritsero Ede's poetry and critical writing for and in excess of the autonomy of the text. Drawing on his work, I intend specifically to demonstrate how an African cosmopolitanism, how an African cosmopolitan paradigm contradicts the lived experiences of both the fictional and non-fictional characters on whose behalf he supposedly speaks. I contend that apart from his reading, wandering as travel, cosmopolitanism celebrates displacement as worldliness and a profound sense of loss as hybridity and contentment. It also more importantly ignores both the material condition that forced the continent against itself, that is Africa against itself, in the so-called age of globalization. I should point out before continuing that there is indeed a lot to admire about the takeoff point of cosmopolitanism, which invites us all to consciously contemplate and consider our ethical responsibility to the other, to strangers, to migrants, to people distant from us by the hard realities of time and space. This vision, of course, does not discount the injustice that permeates our world, yet insists on the category of the other as the critical starting point for the self. As Emmanuel Levinas frames this moral outlook, quote, it might astonish some that faced with so many unleashed forces, so many violent and voracious acts that fill our history, our societies and our souls, I should turn to the I thou, all the responsibility of one person for the other to find the categories of the human. And then of course the human is capitalized very importantly. Elsewhere, Levinas restates his point. The other is the future. The very relationship with the other is the relationship with the future. To bring the discussion home to Africa, many leading scholars such as Achille Mbembe have prominently extended the discourse of this discourse of ethical responsibility under Afropolitanism. For Mbembe, Afropolitanism means, quote, the ability to recognize one's faith in that of a stranger, of a foreigner, and make the most of the traces of remoteness in closeness, to domesticate the unfamiliar, to work with what seem to be opposite. Really, what is not to like about this takeoff point, which powerfully calls us to respect the other in a world of increasing individuality and individualism, where the love of oneself, of one's nuclear or extended family, of one's ethnicity or race, of one's religion, even leads individuals to disrespect, suppress, or close up the borders of relations and hospitality. This is not what I disagree with, nor is it, as I understand it, what unsettles the seemingly cosmopolitan figures in Ede's poetry who roam the world with a deep sense of anguish and an acute awareness of their precarious location on the margins of the world. The terms of the disagreement instead can be summarized under three rubrics. The first is that under the strong formulation of African cosmopolitanism, all claims to origins, identities, and oppositional politics, such as those of Pan-Africanism and African anti-colonialism, dissolve so that they are replaced by border-crossing, multiplex, and thoroughly decentered attitude to worldly living, our worldly dwellings. The second and related point of objection relates to what appears in the African discourse of cosmopolitanism as a strange affect for rootlessness and a dissolution of all claims to cultures, customs, and traditions. As Mbembe states it directly in his inaugural essay on Afropolitanism, in opposition to the fundamentalist preaching custom and autochthony, We can go as far as to assert that, in fact, what we call tradition does not exist, unquote. Membe is not alone in pursuing this argument. Indeed, in Anthony Appier's earlier and later works, such as In My Father's House and Cosmopolitanism, one finds very much the same points. The third point of objection to African cosmopolitanism relates to what appears to be a claim of transcendence or supersession of the ideas of African nations, Africa itself, or patriotism to any of these two units, calling for a poetics of the world, one which opens itself to the plenitude of mobilities, crossings, and intermixing and interculturality. African cosmopolitanism declare the world as their home, or speak of a feeling of being at home in the world. But is there really an African who is at home in the world today? In all fairness, there are strong reasons to sympathize with the cosmopolitan position that the concepts of both nation and nationalism have outlived their relevance. One can point to at least 3 reasons why such claims are valid, including digital interconnection, the rapid neoliberal flow of capital that mocks and renders meaningless the speciality of the fiscal sphere, and of course, the failures of African nationalisms, which have led to massive political corruption, ethnic chauvinism, wars, genocide, and the expulsion of African and other immigrants, including those who have taken these places as home. Like we can refer to, of course, the Ghanaian Compliance Act 1969. We can refer to the famous Ghana Must Go in Nigeria 1983 and another one 1985. All of these things are weakening the claims of the nation. Nations lose their claim to relevance according to this view because rather than reject the colonial essentialization of originary identity, nationalist movements merely intensify them for their pecuniary benefits and for their tribes at large. Yet the question remains, do these 3 reasons exhaust the character of the nation? Do they negate all nationalisms? And do they move us squarely into the center of the world? Or is there even an African, with or without devotion to a cosmopolitan vision of human relations, who can assertively claim, again, to be at home in the world? So far, I've stated the objections to African discourses of cosmopolitanism. What I wish to do now is to present the grounds for these objections. And in doing so, I draw on a mix of my own text and the critical and poetic writings of Amatoritsero Ede. Broadly speaking, most of Ede's writings have been concerned with the world, or put differently, the nature of Africa's and Africans' relation to the world. In Ede's writing, we apparently see a solid cosmopolitan imagination moving the hand that writes to contemplate places, peoples, arrivals, departures, and the material conditions that mediate the global circulation of African literary and cultural objects. Yet nearly always we also find a clear, if haunting, recognition that ours is a world that thrives exactly at the detriment of Africa. To be sure, Ede's point is not that the ethics of finding oneself in the other, of caring for strangers, of recognizing familiarity in difference are problematic. That is not the exact point. What he emphasizes instead, and which leads him to assert the necessity for a Pan-African resistance, for example, are the colonial continuities that painfully structure the terms of Africa's incorporation and co-optation into what appears today in various guises as the vintage examples of cosmopolitanism. The question he asks, in other words, is the same that Gustavo Ribeiro sees as haunting the world that cosmopolitanism speaks of. And that question is, whose world is this world? In an early article titled Narrative Movement and Self-Anthropologizing Discourse, Ede considers, for example, the terms of African writers' insertion into what Pascal Casanova calls the World Republic of Letters. Here, Ede notes, quote, "With respect to the foregoing, my concept of self-anthropologizing is then grounded firstly in contemporary African writing extroversion, a situation in which it largely targets a Western reading public, and secondly, in its need anchored in extroversion to satisfy popular Western habits of reading Africa. It is therefore marked by a kind of narratology that bears traces of the traditional Western anthropological ordering of Africa as uncanny and as a repository of the post-colonial exotic, in Graham Huygens' terminology, unquote. Although in making this claim, Ede accepts that African writers do have the agency, and that in many cases, as with earlier generations of African writers, they have both decried and fruitfully negotiated the terms of their relations with the world. He argues that much of what circulates as contemporary African literature today in the name of the world, in the name of cosmopolitanism, of hospitality, of multiculturalism, that these writings thrive on the implacable exoticism of Africa and Africans. Time here, as in the powerful formulation of the anthropologist Johannes Fabian, mutes Africa in the past against and in defiance of the world, so read as Western, that is constantly in motion. Ede's other scholarly writings are built on this systematic investigation of African literature's travels to probe the conditions of the circulation of Africans themselves in the world. Under Afropolitanism, the feed on which much of his recent writings has been done, Ede asks for a rooted, even nationalist interpretation of the place of African in the world. Returning to race, the very pole of identity that African cosmopolitanism rejects, Ede speaks of what he describes as Black agency that was in the first instance universalized through Pan-Africanist coordination. And that Afropolitanism now seems to supplant, Ede speaks of Black agency that was in the first instance universalized through Pan-Africanism. For Ede, Afropolitanism downplays this Black historical agency, the struggles that made it happen, and the conditions that called for its continued relevance in the past. As Ede sees it, the idea of laying claim to a world, which ironically rejects those doing so, derives from a certain recognition and calculation of metropolitan power, its capacity to consecrate or confer prestige, to reward those who assimilate into it, and consider as socially progressive in the crude Darwinian sense, those who reject the empty, unruly mantra of the colonial resistance. In his words, it is, quote, "It is easy to ascribe the apolitical politics of Afropolitanism as detailed above to a loss of cultural memory, or to what Leela Gandhi refers to as post-colonial amnesia, in which the formerly colonized represses the colonial past. However, these writers seem to be very much aware of the ideological choices that they are making," unquote. To read Amatoritsero Ede's poetry is to encounter a similar concern for Africa and the terms of Africans' engagement with the world. In Ede's poetry, the worldliness of poetry remains fully in focus, yet without losing sight of the important point that all global articulations of aesthetics are anchored in one way or the other in the local. Ede's first collection, instructively titled A Writer's Pain and Caribbean Blues, presents the first full engagement with these questions. To begin with this very title, the first thing one might notice is its appeal to multiple linguistic and generic modes, which in turn invoke a multi-centric network of Pan-African concerns. Here, the artistic and spatial boundaries between the writer and the musician, between writing, orality, and performance, and between Africa, Black America, and the Afro-Caribbean Gulf collapse, giving way instead to surprising overlaps and relations. Following Samogikani, one can call this a form of Pan-African cosmopolitanism, and it will make sense. This is because by crossing several continents, genres, and languages, the writer signals their full openness to the world, but also foregrounds the lopsidedness of the world, of that world. And of course, this is the point of the reference to the writer's pain, or the allusions to global Black artistic formations, such as the blues or the Caribbean Gulf. In the writer's pain and Caribbean blues, Ede sings from the full consciousness of the nation, even though by 1998, when the book was published, he had lived in Germany for almost 4 years. Although the major voice that runs through this book agrees that his nation has failed, he does not for that reason bypass it to sing about the world or to declare himself a citizen of the world, as if doing so automatically resolves the harsh realities of life on the ground. A great somber tone subtends the lyric fashioning of self in this book. A great tragedy marks the voice who sings about a path despoiled by the collusion between colonial and homegrown gangsters. In the opening narrative poem, which is excerpted here, the speaker, says, "The earth is home for all blooded grass, green inhabitants of the undergrowth, which are all my chlorophyll, where are all my chlorophyll, that I wither with leaves, where are all my lives? Unlike the upright tree, I cannot stare into the sun. That's why my soul is heavy. That's why my blood is brittle, not seasoned in its fire. I cannot stand the test of burns. That is why I crawl and sing in hiding. That is why earth sways me. That is why my life recede. My lights recede. That is why. Although I'm not able to reproduce the reshape of the accepted portion of the poem reproduced here, it is important to know that it is fragmented to reflect a world out of joint, to communicate the loss of coherence, or to reinforce the images of death, desolation, and destruction that are prominent in the poem. Also, why the poem is shaped as tacit, its aspiration towards tessarima is frustrated by the chaotic structure of the lines, which simply refuse to rhyme. All of this makes sense if we consider that this poem mourns the death of a nation in a way that leaves no place for hope, joy, or music. At the heart of the poem is a kind of post-lapsarian dirge for Nigeria, represented at first as home and then as life and hope through the symbolic reference to the color green. Just one second. All right, thank you. At the heart of the poem is a kind of post-lapsarian dirge for Nigeria, represented at first as home and then as life and hope through the symbolic reference to the color green. But the attitude of the speaker soon shifts, articulated through sharp binaries of the past and the present, of hope and despair, and of growth and degeneration. The speaker asks a series of questions about the gloomy directions of his life. That the questions themselves are rhetorical as to the intensity of the speaker's internal crisis, and allows him to see that while he may be of the modern world, the times of his incorporation into that world were from the very beginning a matter of violence. The speaker notes one more time then, "And now the poisoned soul is all over gray on the fringes of the world." In this line, the speaker taps into the homophonic plurality of soul to speak again of their psychic troubles, but also to point to the dispersal of souls, as in feet, around the world. If the lines, as I have cited them here, already do not convey enough of the disillusionment presented in this book, consider the following line: "Flag of shame, flag of sorrow, flag of bondage to this Union Jack. Bloated flag full of wind and nothing. Flag big blown back upon the gray dirty wash of the century's latrine." And we can see that, of course. There is no joy here, as we like to say these days, only sorrow. Here, Ede angrily draws on the symbolism of the flag to first signal the social disintegration of life by colonial rule in Nigeria, and second, to index the West neocolonial hold on Nigeria. If a flag is supposed to symbolize freedom, as Ede sees it, Nigeria's flag indexes pain and anguish, and more of the dispersal of the nation's citizens to exile. Here, the repetition of the word flag and its shifting semantic embellishments convey the massive despair, while the vocalic preference for the ing sound, as in nothing, latrine, evil winged, crash flying, into, dying, and rigging, uses cacophony to index the harsh realities of the nation. It took 11 years before Ede's second book appeared. In those 11 years, he had relocated to Canada and founded the literary journal Maple Tree Literary Supplement. The journal was founded, as Ede once explained it, because he recognized that there were people who looked like him, whose stylistic and thematic concerns largely diverged from the aesthetic taste, formula, and parameters valued in literary journals resident in North America. Again, important here was Ede's awareness that cosmopolitanism sounds more like a utopian dream, more like theory than practice, and more like a pacifist aspiration of those who have suffered than those who hold power, than what those who hold power are ready to embrace. All of these themes play out more concretely in the second book, Globetrotter and Hitler's Children, which I now consider briefly. Because I've treated this book fairly substantially elsewhere, I will only describe here some of the general principles and choices that undergird the book and that animate Ede's contemplation on the circulation or lack thereof of Africans in the world. Again, we might turn to the title and cover page. The first thing that is striking here is that the author's name has changed. I mean, the interesting thing was that Ede was first writing with Godwin Ede, right? But by the time he got to Globetrotter and Hitler's Children, he mostly removed Godwin and he started writing as Amatoritsero Ede. That is, if Ede identified himself in the first book as Godwin Ede, he now goes by the name Amatoritsero Ede. That name change, reminiscent of the decolonial onomastic moves of many first and second generation African writers and artists, such as Chinua Achebe, Ngugi wa Thiong'o, Fela Kuti, all of who mostly dropped their, their English names. That name change for Ede issued from his first-hand experience of racism in Germany. For Ede to shift from Godwin, a name that announces his Christian and colonial roots, to Amatoritsero, a name that is as long as it is phonetically complex, is to reject the false notions of cosmopolitanism, of hospitality, and of godliness that circulate in the West and that sometimes mask the raging xenophobia. Importantly, now writing under Amatoritsero Ede in the second book, the author expands his concerns from Nigeria, as in the first book, to the world more broadly. That is, if the first book mostly focuses on Nigeria, except the final section on Caribbean blues, the second book touches on Africa, Europe, and North America. But this difference is only on the face of it. For the farther one reads the book, the clearer it becomes that the speaker in the second book travels and becomes painfully aware that, the rude realities of the nation are in fact the reason why, they have dispersed around the world. I mean, they're roving or wandering around the world. Consider the following lines from that book. The flag in exile, your national colors down, at half-mast, the national pride up for bidding on the international exchange market. New York, Old York, London, Lord Lugard's stronghold. And please notice that New York and Old York are sort of fused together, they are written together, and that's very important for how we think about this, this poem. In his recent book, Indirect Subjects, Nollywood Local Address, Matthew Brown suggests that we might be able to decipher the footprints of Africa's place in modernity by looking at the doubleness, irony, and paradox that marks it. He proposes the term periliberalism for thinking about this. By periliberalism, Brown seeks to capture the seemingly antithetical relation of inclusion by exclusion or exclusion by inclusion on which Africa's place in modernity pivots and which forms the foundation of the world system of capital to the present. This is one way that we might approach Ede's poetry. The poem accepted here. Inserted into the world's traffic of commerce, Nigeria stands in a metonymic relation to Africa, which in turn stands in for the broader imperial project of trading African resources while Africans themselves go hungry or remain unwelcome in the heartland of empire. Orthographically fusing New York and Old York and placing London and Lugard in a conversation through alliteration, Ede suggests that the same old modalities of colonial exploitation that ushered Africa into Western modernity remain very much the same today. But by far the most, and I'm going to the end of the talk now, but by far the most fundamental treatment of the economic exploitation of Nigeria comes in Ede's most recent collection of poetry, Teardrops on the Vesa. And shout out meant to B.B. Ukonu, who published the book under his Pan-African imprint, Grace Lunch. I wanted to point out that the kind of work that people like B.B. Ukonu do for African literature here in the West is very important. It's very, very important. There's no way to, one can't really overemphasize it. A product of the author's 3-month stay in Bremen in 2016, Teardrops unfolds through a contrast of a modestly peaceful life in Germany and the vastly different violence that upends Nigeria. Besides matters of autobiographical connections, that is that Ede once lived in Germany and now he was returning. Teardrops focalizes its German setting because it was there that Africa was partitioned between 1884 and 1885, of course, in the absence of Africans. Reading Teardrops, we see the tears and hear the implacable voice of a Nigerian speaker who, like the speaker of Dennis Brutus's I am the tree, quote, cries endlessly and will not be consoled, unquote. And of course, those lines from Brutus come from the in turn echo the pain of Rachel, who has lost a child in Jeremiah 31:15. Ede's Teardrops is indeed a lament, and the sense of tragedy that it conveys again begins from the title. To zero in, Teardrops as a title works as fun, that is, on the isolated microcosmic tears of a single human speaker and the expansive microcosmic natural life of a river that has no memory or consciousness of the individual. In several ways, this is a very powerful allegorical starting point for thinking about the relation of Africa to the world. In other words, while Africans suffer, the majority of people in the West go about their daily life as if Africa does not exist, as if the comfort that they have is completely unconnected to the ravage on the continent and other colonial sites. There is no doubt that Teardrops remains an elegant example of a lyric, but its use of what Stephen Collis calls formal liminalities pulls it into conversation with news and the ethnographic mode. Like the consummate ethnographer, the dominant speaker in Teardrops surveils the world from the vantage point of a hypersensitive observer, while his reportorial style seems to relay news elsewhere other than the immediate German setting. All through the book, a yawning chasm intervenes between the speaker and the place and the people he describes. That is, while on the one hand, the speaker's eloquent spatial and onomastic references suggest something of an affective proximity or even attachment to Germany, their profuse use of pronominals, their, them, these, they all amplify the distance and loneliness the speaker, who contrastively uses I and ma, feels in this place. On the face of it, the title poem in Teardrops is one long spontaneous roll of verses, marked intermittently by an abecedarian style of caesura. All through it, we are given the impression of a single narrative that stretches from River Weser in Germany to the Niger Delta of Nigeria. Here, the river as a recurring connecting metaphor indexes the natural connection of humans beyond borders, color, race, nation, and other social categories of difference. Yet here is also a paradox, which the speaker of the poem describes in the following representative excerpts. The speaker begins with a sharp, attentive description of River Weser, and we can see the description here. It's so beautiful. Strollers, skaters, lovers, joggers, bikers, walkers, all jostle along the thin neck of this indifferent river. That this is a happy scene cannot be overemphasized, and these, to be sure, is exactly how Ede wants us to see River Weser overall. As we read further, we see that this is in fact a deliberate stylistic choice, which draws on the rhetorical power of vivid description and even of hyperbole to highlight the sharp difference between River Weser and Niger Delta. Listen to how Ede describes the Niger Delta. This hung morning, the immobile Weser is sluggish with memories of dead water on the Niger Delta. In Nigeria, after shell that shocked oil impurities in it, till choked full of poisoned fish and algae, the creek reeks of dead things and people like the Ogonina. To be sure, this is not the first time that Ede will write about the environmental despoliation in the Niger Delta, supervised by the oil multinationals like Shell. In A Writer's Pain and Caribbean Blues, he had first written an elegy for Kensariwiwa in which he lampoons those, quote, who traded their history for a mess of shell porridge, unquote. 23 years after, he had returned to this mother scene of the beginning to sing about the stasis of things and of the incredible coloniality that destroys human and non-human forces alike in the Niger Delta. Importantly, notice that what changes between the first movement of this poem about River Weser, that is this one, and what changes between this poem and this poem is not just the radical shift in the speaker's tone and attitude. More than this is that the speaker too, like the morning, like River Weser, is now hungover and sober. The clarity and temperament and temperance that mornings bring distinguished from the carnivalesque excess and exhaustion of evenings and nights, allows the speaker to realize that what in fact partly sustains the privilege of bodies on River Vesa, which functions as an extended metaphor for Europe, is the same colonial violence that kills and displaces millions in the Niger Delta of Nigeria. Unless we think that this is an atrocity of the past, the poet emphasizes the ramifying life of these colonial violence in the tentacle-like shape of the poem and the consistent return to the lyric present. Notice also that in this excerpted poem, although rivers as natural actors speak back to each other and recognize their differential location in pain and joy, and at least the River Vesa senses the pain of Niger Delta, only the Nigerian speaker articulates his sorrow. As I now round off, I note rather painfully that this way of speaking alone, of shouting and bemoaning one's pains, while those who continuously sustain them, careless, or even foreclose the possibility of speaking or listening altogether, is what makes discourses of African cosmopolitanism a utopian dream, or at best a pacifist helpless cry of an Africa on the fringes of the world. To reject this pacifism, as Ede has consistently done, is not to choose war instead. Rather, is to choose remembrance and vigilance, and to insist on a radical remaking of a world in which, as Anibal Kujano points out, there continues to be, quote, a violent concentration of the world's resources under the control of a small European minority, unquote. This struggle for an equitable world, as I argue, is what Amatoritsero Ede's poetry modestly asks for and makes possible. Dr. Ede, thank you for all your work and for the decades of using writing to ask for new ways of being human and circulating in the world. Thank you all for listening.
Thank you much. Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Bogi, for that brilliant presentation. I will now call on Uche, my co-moderator, to take on the next event.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Uche. And thank you again, Dr. Bogi, for that amazing, enriching paper. I would call on Dr. Paul Ugo to give a short reflection on Ama's works. And after that, Dr. Chielozona Eze would also give his own short remarks. So Dr. Paul Ugo, the floor is yours, or the space is yours.
Thank you, Che. Now, for anyone who's very close to me, you would know that I'm not good at remembering people's birthdays, and I rarely remember even my own birthday. But it's difficult to forget Ama's birthday because he shares the same birthday with my first son. And so usually he would call to talk to me about the revolutionary spirit of those born in March, and essentially to warn me to be on the lookout for when that revolutionary streak would express itself in my son. So my point here being that I've gone through this ritual of talking to Ama on his birthday. But it's really nice to be part of a public event by a cohort of close friends and colleagues who have gathered to celebrate the creative and scholarly work of a very dear friend that all of us love so much. For those of us who are very close to Ama, we know that he's been through a remarkable journey from extreme adversity and precarity to global success. So it's really heartwarming to see people come together to celebrate Ama like this. So thank you everyone for being here. Now, I think Ama's reputation, global reputation, rests on his work as a poet. But I think that in recent years, he's done something else. And I think that contribution, that it's not perhaps recognized, is his role as a cultural and intellectual historian. And much of what I want to do in my reflection is to sort of sketch and capture that role that he has played, at least in the past 10 years, as a cultural and intellectual historian who's provided us very important insights into what he himself calls the cultural materialist dimensions of contemporary aesthetic movements in the field of African letters. So I'm going to turn now to my written piece. I'm getting blank, so I don't know how. Okay, I can read this. Now, Amaya is generally known globally as an accomplished poet, and in recent years as a research powerhouse, blazing new frontiers in international Black literatures and cultures, and a highly prolific curator of both continental African and African diasporic arts and cultures through the now famous magazine or Zine MTLS. As a poet, Dr. Ede became a household name in the field of African and Black diaspora literary circles in the 1980s as that wonder kid, an incredibly talented writer, an incomparable innovator who engaged in bold and almost unprecedented aesthetic experimentations in the treatment of cultural materials in his poetry. Which is why many of those gathered here to celebrate him are creative writers in one form or another. But I do want to reflect on what has become his powerful role in recent years, that is, as an important cultural and intellectual historian of Black culture, or more specifically, the transnational circulation of Black thought and creativity. Cultural history, as we know, attempts to make palpable a bygone past and place. It is generally concerned with beliefs and ideas and how they inform our actions as humans in any society and culture. But what is important about the work of a cultural historian or cultural historians is the attention to the interconnectedness of the past and how it relates to or impacts our apprehension of the present. In a sense, a cultural historian tracks seemingly unremarkable everyday social trends and signposts what is significant about them. In this regard, they point to the political economic dimensions of culture by showing how culture, that is, as a signifying system, is often both a byproduct of and a response to material social conditions. Cultural historians are often invested in tracking, in documenting, and showing the political and economic dimensions of culture, or what you might call the politicization of culture. Dr. Ede has become one of the leading scholars doing this kind of work in the field of African studies. Much of that work, as many speakers have already noted, has been in the burgeoning area of African studies called Afropolitanism. Since 2005, Dr. Ede has been one of the leading voices tracing the genealogy of this aesthetic and intellectual movement, its politics, its implication for African self-assertion, and whether it constitutes a selfless artistic vehicle for expressing Africa's long history and battle with colonial violence and exploitation. Now, in doing so, Dr. Ede has become a fierce interlocutor with some of the most prominent thinkers in African philosophy and literary history and theory, such as Achille Mbembe, Simon Gikandi, Paul Giroy, Anthony Appiah, Tony Falola, our late Pius Adesami, Akin Adeshoka, and of course, our grand patriarch, Chilozo Naize. Now, these are very powerful voices in contemporary African studies, and it is stunning how Dr. Ede has challenged, refined, or totally reconstituted some of their canonical ideas. First, he has helped undrape the fuzziness of Afropolitanism by noting that the adjective is, in fact, quote, a shorthand for African and cosmopolitan. Cosmopolitanism being a microcosm of transculturation, borderlessness, bi-multi-ethnicity, bilingualism, near-nomadic and rhizomatic existence, urbanity, and expansive worldliness, which the substantive Afropolitanism contemplates philosophically and critically. But Dr. Ede makes a very crucial point that there's nothing new about the Afropolitan. There's been a long history of Africans circulating in global spaces, whether by force or as free global citizens. Apart from the earliest Afropolitans who interacted with Portuguese traders in the 15th century and diasporic Black subjects extracted forcibly from the continent as slaves, there's also an early wave of writers and scholars such as Olaide Aquino, Phyllis Whitley, James Walden, Ralph Ellison, James Baldwin, etc., who bore witness to the horrors of what it means to be Black in an increasingly transnational world. Ede's point, though, which is really crucial, is that, quote, the closer an African is in both space and time to the historical occurrence of metropolitan slavery, the less empowered it is, unquote. So in tracking the genealogies of Afropolitanism as a new phenomenon, he not only unpacks what he calls the cultural, materialist, and phenomenological dimensions of this new aesthetic and intellectual movement, he points to how it serves as a generational articulation of newfound power that seeks to distance itself from an earlier pessimism or fatalism expressed by Pan-Africanism. Now, although Afropolitanism has been a very powerful and useful identitarian, intellectual, and aesthetic movement in the past 20 years or so, as our keynote speaker has noted, Dr. Ede has consistently warned that the movement enfolds a dangerous politics that draws, feeds, and builds on the crass individualism and selfishness associated with transnationalism and neoliberal globalization. Intellectual and imaginative trends are often both a response to and a reflection of historical moments. So for those of us in literary and cultural studies, for example, we see modernism as an expression of the Enlightenment ethics associated with European modernity from the 17th century onwards. Empire literature as an aesthetic encapsulation of the ideals of European imperialism. Postmodernism as an aesthetic response to the fractures and uncertainties of postmodernity. And postcolonialism as a forceful intellectual and imaginative reaction to the exclusionary politics of postcoloniality. By focusing and excavating the social material conditions that gave vent to Afropolitanism, Ede demonstrates eloquently how, quote, Afropolitanism is, and in fact, an ideological condition, of cultural production occasioned by metropolitan hierarchies and creating social hierarchies and class formations of its own, unquote. Afropolitans are highly successful Africans who no longer want to be perceived as just Africans. That is, they no longer want to embrace the cultural baggage that identity carries in the global public imagination. This politics of distanciation, of course, has to do with the powerful myth and rhetoric of global citizenship associated with cosmopolitanism. As a cultural historian, Professor Ede cautions that this isolationist politics is a naive strategic move that seeks to overtake history and locate oneself in a present that is disconnected from what is clearly a brutal past. His assertion, which I totally support, is that the promise of Afropolitanism as a form of redemptive politics, quote, can only be fulfilled with respect to lived experience if its two strands, that is, the cultural phenomenon and its political effects, meet as nuanced complements of an ideologically conscious and sophisticated social agency. His crucial intervention as a cultural historian in this new discursive field is that Afropolitanism has great potential only if it draws on its newfound agency to address the relentless colonial assaults being directed at Black personhood, both in the continent and in the New World. My reading of his position regarding Afropolitanism is that Afropolitan politics obsessed with the ephemeral successes of the moment, which seeks to obviate itself from the crude realities enveloping and shaping the lives of ordinary people in Africa and the Black diaspora, ignores the lingering power of the past on the present. The lingering power of the past on the present is bound to fail in the long run, even if it thrives momentarily and benefits a small cohort of empowered Africans leading resplendent transnational lives. Now, his other intervention has been in locating Afropolitan literature as world literature. Now, the ambiguities and polyphony of the meanings in Goethe's uses of the term world literature has also led to uncertainties about the precise meaning of that term. What is remarkable about the ambiguity of Goethe's use of the term is that his idea of world literature emerged in a period of intense nationalism. In Germany, as in Europe and later the Americas, the 19th and the 20th century witnessed the most aggressive effort in writing national literary histories. The process of political nation building and consolidation going on in Europe, especially driven by the tenets of Romanticism, saw each nation striving to ground its national legitimacy in some unique literary antecedents. The main criticism against the idea of world literature is that despite its good intentions, it was, at least until about the 1960s, a Eurocentric enterprise. For Goethe, also interested in Chinese literature and many of his apologists, world literature simply meant European literature. Fritz Strick, in his book Goethe and World Literature, published in 1959, that's the latest version of it, but published way before the term Eurocentrism was coined, argued that, quote, in present-day speech, politically, no distinction is made between world literature and European literature, and that this is a serious error, unquote. He argued that for Goethe, quote, world literature is, to start with, European literature. Now, world literature was seen as promoting largely Anglo-American, white, male, and middle-class identity in mid-20th century America. It was this Eurocentrism in world literature that led to a radical transformation of meaning of the term from about the 1960s onwards, especially in the context of the cultural revolutions happening during that period. In its current usage, world literature is linked with transnationalism. According to Sarah Lawal, quote, world literature is a list of works from around the globe that represent, in some indefinable manner, the essential experience of human beings in different cultures. For David Damarush, who happens to be the preeminent scholar in world literature, he says a work only has an effective life as world literature whenever and wherever it is actively present within a literary system beyond that of its original culture. In other words, when it makes transnational movements and circulation. Now, following from this conception of world literature, Professor Ede notes that when modern African literature emerged in the late 1950s, it entered the global cultural world of letters as Commonwealth world literatures. Now, the key distinction Dr. Ede makes between post-colonial African literatures and its Afropolitan iteration is that, quote, the new African writing considered to be Afropolitan does not engage itself with the historical effects of colonialism on the continent, unquote. He observes that while plot, theme, and narration might engage the existential struggles of characters in a cultural materialist manner, the larger colonialist ontology behind these are never focalized. They are eclipsed in favor of an immediate text-bound rather than historical verisimilitude, unquote. Now, Feng Che has made the very crucial point that what is central in post-colonial world literatures, especially as an interventionist imaginative endeavor, is the fact that it documents the world and bears witness to the pain and suffering of marginalized groups precisely because it seeks to change that world. If world literature is a genre that serves as a testimonial to the experiences and struggles of people in other cultures, especially outside of the cozy bubbles of Euro-American life, what it aims to do is to remake that world, to change or to reward it from one of colonial hierarchies and the extreme exclusions propagated and fostered by neoliberal globalization, to an egalitarian global commons marked by both political, economic, and cultural equity. Professor Ede's major contribution as a cultural historian has been the view that, quote, major contribution as a cultural historian has been the view that, quote, an Afropolitan literary futurism, which corrupts the ontological wording potential of Afropolitan writing as world literature due to a lack of an ideological commitment to the African continent, is what raises queries about its label as world literature. Given the determination of some of the new generation of African writers to distance themselves from the continent and identify more with the global metropolis and the cultural or ethnic deracination associated with it, Ede asks serious questions about the material import of this genre of new African literature in an international literary commons where world literature is concerned with unmaking Eurocentrism. Trained and thoroughly grounded in Euro-American theory and artistic movement, especially German philosophy, yet stubbornly tethered to his African roots, his artistic works, whether poetry, screen or screenplays, or short fiction, bear the marks of a globetrotter who has ingeniously integrated the established canons of the Western literary imagination with his own Afropolitan poetics as an Africanist. While his scholarship focuses on the political and aesthetic dimensions of Afropolitanism as an international cultural, aesthetic, and philosophical movement, his own poetic ovary is emblematic of the new artistic and cultural movement he so masterfully tracks and tackles in his scholarship. His three poetry collections, demonstrate a delicate balance between the polemical engagement with post-colonial terror and the unconscionable cruelty associated with neoliberal globalization on the one hand, and the stubborn commitment to artistic form on the other. It is this subtle equilibrium between the commitment to form and politics that puts Professor Ede amongst the small and highly revered pantheons of Africa's men and women of letters. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Paul. Uche, you want to take over now, please?
Okay, yeah, sure. Thank you very much, Dr. Ugo, for that excellent contemplation of Professor Ede's poetics and his cultural as well as literary engagement with the world. Before we move on to inviting Professor Chilozena Eze for his own remarks, I would like to recognize George Eliot Clark, Canadian poet, playwright, scholar, literary critic, cultural archivist, and one-time Poets Laureate of Toronto, as well as the Canadian Parliamentary Poets Laureate. So, and I believe George Eliot Clark would be giving his own remarks later in the program. But for now, I would like to invite Dr. Eze for his own reflections on Ede's work.
Thank you very much, Uche. I met Ama in Germany, I think in 1995. I met him there. I went to his poetry readings. So at that time, I knew him as a poet. But the closer we became, the more I see him as a philosopher. It's through this prism that I'll do present a very short reflection on his thoughts. Socrates is known by many as the father of Western philosophy. Of course, some claims Plato, but Plato is Socrates' disciple. Now, Socrates was killed for allegedly corrupting the minds of Athenian youths. But his real crime was that he raised penetrating questions that unsettled the order of the day. He was a moral gadfly. The Cynic school of thoughts counts him as one of theirs, even though well, some claim he's not. No? He's not a cynic. But the general definition of a cynic is a person who distrusts people. In truth, however, the Cynic school of thought believes that an unexamined life is not worth living. So the philosophers of this school, the adherents, urge people to examine their lives in order to live more ethically fulfilling lives. For the Cynics, the purpose of life is to live in virtue. They generally questioned convention. That was why Socrates questioned almost everything until there's nothing more to question. At the time, actually the term cynic derives from ancient Greek word kynikos, that is being dog-like. So they were called dogs. Well, perhaps most likely African dogs, because of their unconventional lifestyle and their decision to live on the streets. They were intellectual flamethrowers. They unsettled the epistemic zone. It's within this tradition that I locate Amatoritsero Ede. I call him a cynic in the Socrates sense. Of course, having been a Buddhist monk for a while, he essentially lived like a dog that's rejecting conventional lifestyle, questioning everything. Ama brings the dog-like, Socratic epistemic disposition to bear on African intellection. For example, in his essay, The Politics of Afropolitanism, he took on the celebratory embrace of Achille Mbembe's unique notion of openness to otherness in the African context, and which Haile Selassie applied rather liberally. And when I was about to sit back and celebrate having grounded that notion in a philosophically more convincing manner, Ama, our Socrates, raised questions that I thought to have addressed. What exactly is Afropolitanism, he asks? Does it really serve Africans outside the academy? He argues that the term might actually apply only to the privileged cultural producers in the metropolises. The phenomenon of Afropolitanism, he argues, is to some extent a subjective and cultivated condition and has become a cultural instrument of Black political agency in the metropolis. However, it goes on, the resultant self-affirmation accrues only to the Afropolitan cultural producer who acquires symbolic capital towards that goal, unquote. I realized that I might have just celebrated rather prematurely, premature celebration, if you like. Indeed, I endorse his idea, quote, that Afropolitanism is a transnational material and ideological condition, which leads to an inherent individualism and identity politics when it is confronted by metropolitan racial class tensions and political difference. So this line of thought, these important questions that engage what it means to be African in the West has been picked up by many younger African intellectuals, one of whom is Dr. Tosin Bogi in his brilliant essay against Afropolitanism, Race and the Black Migrant Body in Contemporary African Poetry. Another example is in his iconic essay, titled How Afropolitanism Unworlds the African World, Ama taps into his mythopoetic prowess, into his talent as a wordsmith, to yet again question the ontological assertions of Afropolitanism. He questions the worlding, what he calls the ontological worlding potential of Afropolitan writing as world literature due to its lack of an ideological commitment to the African continent. To that effect, he asks a simple Socratic question: what is a world? Other questions about Afropolitan texts that are central to his inquiry include: does such a text change the subject's perception of the objective world or impact the history of ideas on the continent and in the African and Black diaspora at all, or in any significant way? He argues that the neurotic repression of the past is discernible in the Afropolitan or Afropean writer. The writer, scholar, or thinker as a molder of public thought and social reality would be irresponsible to refuse to engage such a past. I return to the first question, which has duly pricked my curiosity as a philosopher. What is a world? And to that I ask, how do we make it? I begin with a tentative answer, or simply a thesis. A world is what you make of reality. And you make it with words. So for those of us who have read the Bible, perhaps as literature or whatever, there is a particular book that began this way. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. John, the author of that book, belonged to the Gnostic school. There's a Hebrew who was an adherent of Hellenistic thought, Greek thought. He was basically borrowing from the Stoic Platonic school of thought, to the effect that, and that school of thought established that everything that exists was created out of logos. And by logos, of course, we mean reason, or word, or myth. American philosopher Nelson Goodman reminds us that outside the incontestable fact of our physical world, like this cup, you cannot challenge it, it's here. There are no doubt many different world versions out there. Indeed, there are as many worlds as people are willing to create. Goodman obviously refers to the world that is constituted of sets of values which regulate our relation to the physical world. These worlds are born of words. This is the word that Ama is introducing to us, playing with words in order to create new worlds. So these worlds are born of myths, religion, language, and science. They are products of words. Thus, what? We can have words without a world, but no world without words or symbols. In other words, to make new world out of the old world is what is needed, and what is needed are mere words in which are contained symbols and myths, and through these we communicate values. Thus, world making always starts from words already on hand. The making, I quote, is the remaking. It's a process of taking apart and putting together, the result of which is consolidated by the application of labels, names, predicates, gestures, name it. So every day we create words. All of these words have their validity in themselves. So long as contrasting right values, so long as these different worlds are negotiated among themselves, they are all correct in themselves. So what exactly is Ama doing? What is the ethical content of his questioning of our world? So what is his ultimate epistemic goal of exposing the worlding of Africa, or of urging an unworlding and a rewarding? So French Renaissance philosopher Michel de Montaigne is famous, among many things, for reviving the Socratic form of world and self-interrogation. We are all surely aware of his famous quotes, "Que sais-je? What do I know?" "Que sais-je" is Socratic to the degree that it foregrounds one's ethical disposition to knowledge and to the world. Again, an unexamined life is not worth living. So what else does the examination begin, or where else does it begin, if not in oneself and in one's epistemic attitude to the world? Montaigne urges a good dosage of self-effacement in our engagement with reality. It's in this tradition, once again, in the Socratic and Montaigne's tradition, that I locate my dear friend, philosopher Ama. Predominant in his thought is this Montaigne's confession of limited knowledge of the world. This limited knowledge of the world accompanied by an undying quest to understand it. And we understand the world in order to live more fruitfully, in order to engage the world in a more rewarding way. So this self-effacement, this epistemic humility must accompany our intellectual courage as we embark in unworlding and rewarding the world. It's in words, once again, that meaning and values reside. We who deal with words, we people of the mind, are challenged to direct our intellectual power to the service of yet another important question: what kind of world do we want to live in? Ama helps us to take apart the world in which we inherited, the world we inherited, we take apart that world in order to reconstitute it. So how does our thoughts, our Ama will ask, we modern African and global intellectuals, how does our thoughts, does our concept, or rather the concepts we throw around, concepts such as Pan-Africanism, Afropolitanism, Afro-pessimism, Afro this and Afro that, what are they doing? How do they enhance our mutual understanding between Africans outside the gaze of the West? Do they enhance understanding between the African born in Abakaliki and the African born in Zungeru? If our concepts, as Ama would pose it, if our concepts, if the ideas, if our unworlding of the world does not enhance a better ethical relationship between these two people, then I think we need to go back to the drawing board. Perhaps in reassembling that world or in creating a new world, may it not be one in which difference will no longer be imbued with any essentialist, or rather, may it be the world in which difference will not be imbued with any essentialist values. May it be one in which all lives will flourish. Is such a world possible? Is it possible in our mother continent and in Nigeria or wherever we are? There is a certain degree of Paul Gilroyan convivial spirit in Ama's thoughts that are grounded in his essential openness to otherness, regardless of your ethnicity. This is one of the things I love encountering when I read his works. This Paul Gilroy, this Montaigne, this Socrates, the challenge for us to take a distance from our inherited values, from our inherited prejudices, in order to question these prejudices, we question this epistemic disposition in order to live a more ethically informed life. That, I think, is for him, and my understanding, the rewarding elements on his thinking, a rewarding that should allow us to say, I'm a happy human being, and to also be interested in other people around us saying exactly the same thing. So thank you very much, Ama, for giving us this opportunity to build on your fertile thoughts, fertile words, as you will say. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Should I go ahead or do you want to?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Eze. There's so much riches to unpack from your superbly profound reflection on Dr. Ede, and I wish we can get an opportunity to see all these papers by Dr. Bogi, Dr. Ugo, and Dr. Eze available in print, so we can also go back to these works and really digest them in more fullness. So at this point, we're almost in the last lap of this event. So we'll be taking poetry readings and tributes. And I don't know if Uche Nduka is here. I have not seen him yet, but if he's not here, we can just move right away to Professor Kajeta Iheka to give a short reading of Ede's poetry, I suppose. And then after that, we'll just go right away into all the tributes according to the way we've put them out in the chat box. I think we can start after Professor Iheka. Will start with Abimbola Olufeagba, Professor Akin Adesokan, German Anikulapo, and George Elliott Clark, and any other person who is disposed to making a few remarks or comments on Ede's work or personality or even his interaction with you.
I also think Shola Ade Nekon is also listed here.
Yeah, but I was hoping he would include that in his toast, since Professor Shola will be giving a toast soon.
That's fine.
So yeah, I would like us to invite Professor Ieka to give us a rendition, poetic rendition. Thank you very much.
All right, it's great to be here. Thank you, Dr. Uche Peter Umes and Dr. Grace Uche for organizing and for shepherding us. I want to thank my brothers and friends who have spoken before, Professor Eze, Professor Ugo, and Professor Bogi for his terrific keynote. I'm reading from Teardrops on the Vesa, the latest collection. Because of time, because I want to make sure that everybody gets in, I will restrict myself to just 2 poems rather than the 4 that I planned. I'm reading from page 7, B. This river is grounded rain, splattering into a big brown bowl. A silent concert of absent raindrops dropping, settling into a muddy flood of tears, finely strung together. It is the vessel mermaid with fishtail lying supine, serpentine heap on sudden river floor, pining for a scaly mama lover, shedding turbid tears, shimmering, tears squeezed out of nymph eyes and sculpted as watery fish scales, spreading out evenly on the back of this endless brown wave, twisting, turning, coiling and uncoiling with the current, tiny wavelets and eddies, surging and elbing into Orkin bilge and great bulge of water, slushing and rippling, pooling as in the bathtub, forming the Vesa's mobile frosted glass liquid face. A river brown translucent mirror across the land, splintering the sun and sending forth a many fractured light, hard and bright as flashing swords, sudden as cascaded coins, blanked brightly on the waters and scintillating in the sun, through foam and soap suds. And I want to read my favorite part of the collection on page 38 and 39, which links the Versa to the Niger Delta, to Nigeria in some of the ways that Professor Bogi was referring to earlier. Yeah, I'm reading W, page 38. German waters, not unlike the Niger or Benue, which slaked Sarawiwa's infant thirst. Did Maria Rilke, that master poet with the most girlish of names, ever drink from the, let me take it again. Did Maria Rilke, that master poet with the most girlish of names, ever from the Vesa drink? Like another capital poet who pines for the Ethiop, singing his thirst, go water, go rivering, where the eyes that look becomes the brook. The Niger and the Benue, both troubled Nigerian waters flowing together as one into the Atlantic, like the Fuda and the Vera into the Vesa and the Rhine. The Fuda and Vera, both differently planned, not roughly charted, but deep in different degrees, and not discovered from far away by a stranger from England called Mungupa. Not waterways to ferry and ship black bodies to a Europe poisoned New World. That trafficking of black souls in rotten ship holds that trafficking of black souls in rotten ship holds across the cursed Atlantic. And I will stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much, Professor Ihoka. At this point, I would like to call on Abimbola Olufegba for his tribute, and then after him, we will have Akinade Shokan, and followed by German and Ekulapu. Thank you. Abimbola Olufegba. All right, maybe we should.
Yeah. If she's not in, we can just move on to the next.
Let's move on to Akin Adeshokun, please.
Professor Adeshokun.
Hello.
Yes, we can hear you, Prof.
How are you all?
Great.
Okay, well, thank you for doing this for Amatoritsero Ede and for all of us.
You don't know how we are.
What? I wanted to start by reading a page from his first collection.
Is the page empty?
Okay, well, that's the story. So if you know Amatoritsero from 1995 or from Canada, then you don't know him. Okay, because then he had become a school person. But the Amatoritsero that I knew in 1991 or actually in 1988 was not a school person. And his first collection of poems was called Piety in the 20th Century. You will not see that book. I know, and I can assure you that the first edition quickly sold out. And this was the first page from it. That was a joke. That was Amatoritsero that we knew back in 1988, in 1989 at SUB at the University of Ibadan. The whole point of the book, of course, was that the idea of piety in the 20th century was an empty page. So he banned a book that didn't have any text on it, and he called it his first collection of poems. So that's Amatoritsero. At that time, we used to call him a name that he doesn't want to be remembered or reminded of, and I'm going to call that name now, whether he likes it or not. And that's Godwin. That's how we used to know him. I think it's the same name as Amatoritsero, Olusegun, and all of that. But that's the Amatoritsero or the Godwin that we know. That was the same Godwin who will be talking to us about the book by Chukwuemeka Ike. The title is Our Children Are Coming. And if you know Amatoritsero, you know why he will tell you of a title like that. And when he came to Germany in 1995, which was, I guess, where Che Lozona first met him, I know the week before he left Nigeria for Germany, we were together at the University of Ibadan, and there were a few guys who came from Germany for some student exchange, and he basically just took to them. And after that, the next thing we heard was I was in Germany. So that's another story that we need to know. But why I'm saying all of this is to say that the point that Che Lozona made about Amatoritsero being in the tradition of the skeptical or Socratic kind of philosopher or philosophizing is really very well appointed. It's true. The difference between him and Socrates is that he's less serious in terms of his real projection of values than the kind of I won't say essentialism, but earnestness that you associate with Socratic philosophy. Amatoritsero is just is a rascal. I mean, he's much older than me. I don't think he would like being called a rascal by a younger person. But he's my. We went way back, and so I know him really in ways that there are words that I call him, names that I call him that I can't call him in public, because because But in any case, he's a wonderful guy. He's everything. He's a poet, like a poet as in poet and nothing else. All this philosophy, professorship, he has to eat, and that's why he has to do all of this. But Amatoritsero is just a poet, a very original kind of poet. And so if you know Uchenduka, Harry Garuba, Sonya Osha, Fumi Adewale, Olumide, these are the people that we hung out together at Ibadan, and it was really very much Chiedu Ezeana, Nduka Otiono, Remiraji. So he's in that, and he's really, really a poet in that sense. So when I said that his first book was a book of poems that has no text, it was really, he was writing poetry then. And of course, that book came out as a writer's pen before he wrote Globetrotters Hitler's Children, and then the Canada phase is a much later phase. So that I just want to reinforce both the philosophically inclined description of him, but also to say that essentially is an area boy with a degree, in a serious sense, and he's also, in part of being a professor, he's also failed or refused to lose the common touch. And I think that's really very important. I call him a Shulalu because he has this extremely principled practice of unpredictability. And I think those values are essentially what will indicate him being always having the common touch. There's not much to say. I've read his scholarship, and he knows, and actually, and he can also tell you that was quite something of a mediator when he was trying to make the transition. But I'm really interested in us really talking about his poetry, because that's essentially what he set out to do. He hasn't left it; he continues to do it, and he really cannot. As he turns 60, Amatoritsero Ede, wish you more. I hope you continue to be creative, and the way to, of course, remain creative as a creative person is to continue to live in ways that your creativity will be sustained. So whatever it is that makes it possible for you to maintain this youthful look, I think you should continue to drink whatever it is that you've been drinking, and not lose any of that. Anyway, happy birthday, and I can speak until tomorrow about you, but I would rather stop here and yield the grant to other people. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Akande Shokon. At this point, I will call on Jaman and Ikulako, and I think he's still in the house. So, Jaman, please take the floor, or take the space. Jaman. All right, if he's not here yet, I would like to call on Alhaji Kayode Odedinro. Oh, Jaman is here. Okay, so please.
Please unmute.
Yeah, unmute yourself, please. Let me unmute you here. Oh, please, you need to unmute yourself, Jaman. Jaman, please unmute yourself.
Maybe we can just go over to.
Maybe we can move on.
While he's figuring that out.
Okay. Alhaji Kayode Adedinro. Odedinro, not Adedinro. Odedinro.
Do I have to unmute myself, or people can hear me?
We can hear you, sir.
We can hear
Please
you.
go ahead.
Thank you very much. And for everyone that's come to celebrate my childhood friend. I will say this, it's been overwhelming, all this, your big grammar I've been hearing. And I had to start thinking about all these big grammar you guys have been doing all along. But well, sometimes you have to endure stuff. I'm almost sleeping here, but you know what? Trying to, juggle all these things together. Amatoritsero Ede. I met him when I was about 15, 16. I'm sure nobody has that kind of background among us. I checked all the names. I couldn't find any of our friends there that we grew up together. This is somebody that actually was living across my house where I grew up at Ibadan, in Oyo State, Nigeria. This guy has been writing poetry since he was in Form 2 or 3, like say 78, 79. I'm even surprised that his work was just published around that 88, 89 while he was at UI. This guy will write long list of stuff. Yeah, I was a science student that time. I will see it. I said, what are you writing? It's only literature and English that this guy is very good at, was very good at that time. Very, very, very humble beginning. Unfortunately, we're supposed to be celebrating this kind of person in Nigeria today, where we had a lot of kids that believe that you have to have all this flamboyant or upper class life to achieve anything. Godwin. Then somebody said, oh, he doesn't like to be called Godwin. Yes. But those of us that knew, he was actually named Godwin. This Ama, I have to ask me, yeah, what is Amatoritsero? He said, oh, no, I don't want that name anymore. There is another name which all of us knew him with then. I will mention it on this floor. He's called, his nickname is actually Natty. Because Godwin loves to dance. Very good dancer. Then he was actually, a doyen of the dance hall that time. Very good dancer, loves to work out. And that, I would say, is the secret of behind his youthful look today. I didn't even know that we are age mate because I will turn 60 next January. So it was just there. So Godwin, you're older than me by a few months. He's a gentleman to the core who loves people. All his works, you guys have described it. It shows his deep-rooted Africanism, whatever you want to call it, that I saw. And it's been there forever. I love him as a brother. We grew up together. I knew his struggle. And at a point, somebody like him needs to go back home in Nigeria and talk to the kids and let people know about his background. Godwin came from nothing to become whatever he is today. He never gave up. And I'm sure he's still not giving up till now. So I'm so happy that his colleagues have come out together to celebrate him. Thank you on behalf of his family, and thank you all of you, because I'm a member of his family. I knew where I came from. So thank you so much. I won't take a lot of your time. Thank you so much on behalf of Godwin's family for all you his colleagues to celebrate him. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing with us, and making it very clear to us that the Ama we know is not an Ama that was cloned, from, it's an authentic Ama that is from, childhood. He has always resonated all the qualities that we all find in him as we encountered him in our life journey. At this point, I think German is back, so I would like to call on German and Nikolaku to give a very short remark about Ama. And then I also want to quickly say, if you are also interested in saying a few words, just 1 minute, just let me see the hands up and I will call you. I already have a couple of people indicating in the chat. So German, please, the space is yours.
Okay, yeah, well, good afternoon, everyone. I've actually been here since the beginning, but
Yes.
I guess Nigeria was happening to my phone because I don't know why I couldn't unmute. I couldn't open my camera, so I have to come on the laptop. Well, I'm happy to be here. Thank you very much for doing this for Ama. Let me start with what we plan. Ama is coming to Nigeria in June, and what we plan to do is to have a session in which he will be able to read to his comrades, associates, and people who probably do not know him. And I'll tell you at the end of my short tribute why I'm saying that. I thought Professor Adeshokon will not mention the name that we call Ama then. It was Eshu Lalu. And he enjoyed being called Eshu because actually he carries, he had the character of that. I can see him smiling too. Ama belongs to this group of people that we call behind their back. I'm not sure we ever said it to the president that they were like spirits. These were poets. We all came from the Thursday group in Ibadan, Arigarba, and when we came to Lagos and tried to take on Lagos. But there are some of these characters that you can't really define. Maybe some of us try to be regular in some way, even though we're all drunks and smokers and co. But there are some of them that you could not just determine how they look and what was this special everything about them. In that case, Ari was our godfather actually in that. And you know, we also know about Izzy Ahmad, Edia Yojo, you know, that, characters like that. Uche Nduka, whom I'm surprised that he's not here. We call them spirit because you really could not place them. But we know that these were the guys that were driving the force of literary activities in Lagos. Of course, Sheson Ajayi, that, you know, gentleman. Sometimes we wonder how he found himself in our midst because he looks so different, to the point that when we're starting the Art Stampede in 1991, it was Sheson Ajayi that we brought to handle that topic. What is the color of your literature then? Because we're not sure the kind of literature that we're producing at that time. And I remember the meeting where all of us, where we had all those kind of discussion. But what I want to say about Ama is the fact that the 90s, and that's my conclusion, you know, the people who worked in the 80s through the 90s, who did quite a lot of work to lay the template. I mean, okay, we know about the Japa, that people have to move, even before Japa, people have to move. You know, who laid the foundation for what we do in Lagos now? The fact that Lagos is booming in terms of literature, in terms of activities, in terms of cultural production and expression and things. Some people lay the templates. But it's like the moment they stepped out, we just tended to have forgotten about them. And I'm putting this blame right at the foot of our organization, like the Association of Nigerian Authors, the Lagos Poetry League. And, you know, there are so many of them like that. I'm not too sure that we connect back to them when we discuss literature. I was at the launching of somebody who was 2 turned 60 some few days ago too. And there was no place where any of this name was mentioned. When Ari Garuba passed on, I thought it was a moment to be able to celebrate what he did, because we always give it to him that it was Ari Garuba, actually, with the New York Shundari Audio of Fame on, who held us by the hand and made sure that we do the very little that we could do. There are those audio is still around and cool, but we do not even make connection back to people like Ama, even in spite of the fact that he also had a platform, the MTLS, where many of us also have our voices to be heard, but we're not connecting back to them. I also blame those of us who went to work in the newsroom. Probably it's the failure of our job that we did not. I'm no longer there. In the last 10 years I've left, but maybe we do not do enough to connect. But then we had creativity, we had a platform then that were connecting all of us, but then all of them died out. Is it part of the death of the Nigerian sensibility? Is it part of this whole rush of disconnections that we have in the country, even in our polity, in our economy, in our social life? And I don't know, I can't place my hand on it. I'm just saying that, Ama, thank you very much for the work that you have done. And in saying that, I'm also saying thank you to those of you who are outside, Akande Shokon, Uche Nduka, all of you who are the Project Chilizona, Polugo, all of you who are out there who are doing the work. Please keep on doing it. Maybe we'll be able to have occasions like this to be able to celebrate you. But in June, Ama, you know, once you step in, we are going to kidnap you from the airport. And I mean kidnap in quote. And then make sure that you are connected to the Nigerian. Yeah, happy birthday, my brother. Thank you. Thank you, Uche and Grace and everybody who is in the house.
Thank you very much, German. We are really grateful that you are here also to celebrate our friend and brother. I would like to continue because we have a couple of people that have indicated. Shola, please, I will want you to wait till the end so that you will do the your section and then you will do the toast. However, I want to call on 2 people real quick. Professor Bayo Aregbeshola, I hope I got the pronunciation right. Yes, after him, then we'll call on Olugbede Ali, I think. Yes. And then we have Kole Odutola as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Madam. Thank you very much. I'm not a professor, I'm a public servant, so I'm in IT. I'm fortunate and privileged to be among you. You are all men and women of words, so I will try my best to be as eloquent as some of you here. Thank you. I'm very privileged and honored to be among you and to be able to share my own experience with Ama. If I could remember correctly, I think I had our first cross at SUB in UI. He was sitting with the late Arigaruba, and I had gone there with one of the then student union president of the University of Ibadan. We had gone to SUB, and DJ had gone to speak to Arigaruba. Then I saw, Amma sitting with Arigaruba. I said hello, but then subsequently he went to Germany, so I didn't see him again until maybe almost 20 years later in Canada. Then we met through another mutual friend now, the late Professor Pius Addison, who was my roommate at the University of British Columbia. And then Amma and I just hit it up the first day, even though initially there was an odd moment when he introduced himself as Ishulalu. I'm like, okay, my father was a pastor. How do I reconcile friendship with a sheep? So Pius said, I don't mind it. And it's one of the scholars that have renounced European Christianity. But what really struck me out is the qualities that I always look for in friendship that Amma really possessed. And I will just mention a few. Authenticity. Your good friends are always very authentically clear with you on where they stand and who they are. The second attribute is honesty. Your friends are usually honest with you, even if you disagree with their perspective, they will still share their honest perspective with you. Trust. You can easily trust your good friend because life is not about the quantity of friends that you have. It is about the quality of friends you have. And I had a particular human rights challenge in the public service when I first joined. And then because one of the requirements to be a senior public servant in Canada, and please permit me to quickly just share that story because it kind of illustrates clearly why Amma is one of the most reliable person. One of the requirements was to be bilingual if you have to be an executive in the Canadian public servant. Then I had enrolled in French school as part of the requirement on the bill of the Canadian public at the Canadian Public Service. So one of the teachers asked me to sing and dance because Black people are good dancers. So I found it very ridiculous. and up front, I share with Amma and Pius. And Amma took it over for himself. I think he felt slighted in many ways. That okay, someone that had worked with the United Nations, he was doing his PhD then, and a Caucasian teacher is now asking him to dance reggae. So he actually petitioned the Canadian Human Rights Commission, and he took it upon himself. And he stayed loyal. He was with me. He stood with me through that. And I'm like, this is a good guy. And I told Pius, I'm like, you've got a good friend that will stand behind you and beside you. Even after Pius passed, he still stand beside Pius and his family. So congratulations, my brother. It's like, I call him Boda Amatu. In Yoruba land, we call whoever is older than us Boda. He doesn't like that because we are friends. He doesn't want me to call him Boda. Congratulations. Welcome on the, I wish you all the best on the 6th floor. And thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you so much, sir. We are glad you are here. I will call on Professor Kole Odutola.
I'm not be professor.
Sorry, I beg, no best. I just call everybody professor.
I not be professor, and I beg,
no
make
best,
I don't carry go put for my pocket.
No best.
I think I carry the only title in this place that I'm the only one who does not know Amma. I don't know him, and he doesn't know me either. But we are just, when it times to grumble and complain, we are brothers. I can't tell you how many times we write each other to complain about one thing or the other. And that is the only Amma I know. All of you know him. But I also, when I lived in Badon, I heard of one man that worked with Bakut, and he was always everywhere, that he would just surface, in places where things needed to be done.
And that was, I was just hearing about this, but I knew then they would say Godwin. So I know that we are here for a birthday party where thoughts are served as food and drinks, delicious enough to bring out our thinking caps instead of decapping bottles of wine or diverging hot plates of jollof rice. We shall rise within 60 minutes to salute Amma, a man of letters, who lets her into his universe of words. We salute Amma with flutes and harp music. We're here to hear the sage on his own stage. We're here for a birthday party where pals sing praises of God, winning battles and of giving victories. One up for the man who publishes others and is very well published. So ladies and gentlemen, give it up to Amatoritsero Ede, the man in Germany, in Nigeria, in Canada, and even in the Caribbeans. When they say a man is very well traveled, this is a man who has, I think he was even in Japan. I shouldn't forget that. Was it Japan or South Korea? I know. It was Japan?
South Korea.
South Korea. Well, South Africa is waiting, and all the south of the world are waiting for you. But I know that from the last Grumry session we had, it looks like Canada is home, and you have even planted, you've planted orange trees and agbalumo there, which will take years to harvest. Okay, thank you very much. That's from the only guy who does not know Amma.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much, Kole Odutola. I would like to call on Adebantu, and then after Adebantu, we will quickly move on to having Amma's response, and then after Amma's response, Sholade Nekon will come up, do his tribute, and then give us the toast. Thank you. Adebantu.
Sorry, just a quick.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening. Adebantu, you want to give me a second? Uche, you wanted to say something?
Please. Andrena has indicated that she would like to say something. So after Adebantu, we can allow Andrena to say, and then we're moving on to Shola. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. It is indeed an honor to be celebrating our dear brother, Amma. It's been one hell of a journey. We met in Germany through a mutual friend, Uche Unduka, and I've been crisscrossing the globe and always having my brother like in front of me, because Amma is one hell of a rabble rouser. In Germany, he definitely made sure that we had lots of fun. It was just a beautiful experience seeing his dedication, how he has honed his craft, how he channeled his energies, both as an activist, anti-shell campaigns. He was there. He was at the forefront of the battle in Germany, an exile who missed home, but didn't let that depress him or didn't let that stop his creativity. It was just beautiful to see how he kept on marching, and Germany wasn't easy, I know. And the racism there is very real. And seeing how he has been able to expand his horizon and to see how he has stayed positive, because I mean, life throws all kinds of challenges at you, and yet still our brother is standing strong. And 60 no be beans. That's what I was telling you earlier on, because I was like, bro, there's so many that started this journey and that are not here. Unfortunately, we shouldn't forget them as well. And it's just incredible how he's just done his thing. And I look forward to nursing a couple of bottles with my brother and singing out as loud as we can, because we definitely need to hear his voice. And Godwin knows how to sing. We need to get him on stage very soon. So I look forward to backing him with my band. All the best, my brother. Lots of love.
Thank you so much, Adeban too. Now we'll call on Andriana to give her tribute, and then after that, Amma, please get ready. Once Ariana finishes with her tribute, you will give us a response. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I've met Amma in 2008 when we were both grad students at Carleton University in Ottawa, Canada. It was during an event that was organized for students who had received bursaries for their academic achievement. And we've been friends since then, and Amma has also become a part of my family, having stayed for a while with my brother, participating in family events. Amma recently visited us and had a great time with my daughter. We call him Uncle Amma. And we have, I was fortunate to witness Amma's journey from 2008 to now, and see his courage, determination, and resilience. For me, Amma is really a true model of perseverance. Happy birthday, Amma.
Thank you, Andriana. We really appreciate you joining us today. So at this point, Uche, you want to take it on and call on the next?
The celebrant.
Yes, call on the celebrant,
please. So I'm so honored to have the opportunity to invite Dr. Amatoritsero Ede to please give his appreciation, and then so we can toast him and possibly watch him dance, even if it's just only virtually. And yeah, so please, Dr. Ede, the space is yours to appreciate everyone who has shared some love with you. So please go ahead.
Thank you, everyone. Before I go on, there's a high school friend of mine. We went to secondary school together. Kole Olaiwola is telling me that he needs to say something. Can you say something quickly?
I just saw that now. Let's give him the space to quickly say something in less than 1 minute.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, please.
Yes, I think we need 1 hour to talk about Godwin. Yeah, we have known Godwin for about 46 years now. Yeah, we first met at the secondary school in Ibadan, Nigeria, and we've become friends since then. If I have to say things about Godwin, I will say he's a crazy guy. And we have memories to share together. He has come a long way for us to achieve all these great heights. We both came from a very, very humble family. And we've known each other's families. We studied together at school, we fought at schools, we joked at school, and we were able to achieve so much. We lost contact after high school, and it was about maybe 15 years later that we connected over the internet. And since then, we've been talking, discussing family matters, discussing progress. And I like to thank God and you guys for organizing this for him. Unfortunately, about 48 hours ago or thereabout, one of our schoolmates, Dr. Odukogbe, passed away. And it's a great thing that we, our mates, are still here talking. So Godwin, I wish you the best in life, which you deserve. You have come thus far, and I know God has something to do with your life, and you have something to do with your lives too. And I have to thank all of you once again for celebrating my very good friend. He's been a person that you will love to always speak with. Anytime we are on phone, we speak for about nothing less than 1 hour at a time, not minding the time difference. And when he told me that you guys are organizing this for him, I have to wake up. This is 4 a.m. in Australia, Sydney, Australia, and I have to wake up and honor him. He's a very honorable friend, and we cannot do anything but celebrate him. Goddy, good on you. Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much. So I'll now go on with the response. It's humbling and to have friends. You know, these friends, most of you are practically family by now. You all know that I've been practically on the road all my life. So if talking about family, I'm always just moving. So the families that I have are actually my friends. And those are the people I call if there's any issues going on. I have my cousins here, the Banjo, Yinka, Tunde, and Bumi. I don't know if they are still there. So, but you all other people have joined those to become family, like Peter Scrandis from UK. He made my time in Hanover, Germany, generally in Germany, very pleasurable. And other people here who have, who have had experiences with, accompanied me through life. It's interesting to see that the way I see myself is probably in alignment with what you guys feel, but it's just that I never consciously reflect on it. The dancing, the stubbornness, the being contrarian, and the issue character, because I love issue as a, I call him my patron saint, because he sort of challenges your wit, makes you think out of the box. So my life has been an out of the box kind of thinking. So left Nigeria with $40 in 1994, December. I remember Ralph Illibrand picked me up. I don't know if it was Frankfurt. He's not here because he doesn't like social media. And then I went straight to Hanover and I stayed with Peter and Rudiger. Rudiger is not here right now. So it's really pleasurable that everything I am is because of all of you. Things that I've achieved, you might have encouraged me without even realizing it, just by being yourselves. And there are those who gave me material support, like Ralph, who sort of put money in an account for me to be able to get my visa to go to Germany in 1994. It was tough. I didn't have money for a ticket. And Ralph also sent money to some of us friends in Nigeria. Said, here's some money for beer. I said, I can't drink beer with this money. So I went to a flight. I went to a travel agency. I asked a friend, Olubi Phillips, if he knows any travel agent. We went there and begged the guy to give me full ticket and paid for half. So I was sending back the half ticket when I got to Germany. So it's really whatever we achieve in life, it's not done alone. Just as we say with the PhD, it takes a village for you to get a PhD. Your immediate committee, and then those outside, those who encourage you, your family and friends. So I I thank everybody for celebrating me today. Normally, I'm a very quiet in the background person. I thank Grace and Uche for insisting that, yeah, we have to celebrate. I said, no, they dragged me, foot and hand, kicking. Said, we will celebrate this one. I said, okay. So I thank you for organizing this, and I thank Chielozona, Paul, Ugo, and Tosin Bugi for all your presentations. You know, making me see myself like in a movie, like, you know, presenting all this, sort of analyzing me the way I didn't really look at myself. And my childhood friends too, you know, Kola and Alaji, you know, I thank everybody. And when it's time, I hope I'll be able to celebrate all of you as well in the coming months and years. And I also thank Kajetan for being a quiet force, always in the background, always encouraging. While I was writing my PhD dissertation, while he was writing PhD dissertation, we gave the PhD dissertation a nickname. We call it DC, and we feminized it and said, DC is a stubborn girl. I'm sorry for the feminists in the house. That's not meant in a what's it called? What's the word for it? Misogynistic way, but we feminized dissertation as being a very unmanageable young woman. And that ongoing joke helped us to do our work, you know. So I thank everybody for coming. If I didn't mention your name, it's not out of, you know, there's a lot of people here, so I might not be able to mention everyone, but I appreciate every single person in this celebration. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ede. At this point, Dr. Shola Adeniko is going to do the toast. I would encourage everyone to please reach for your glass of wine, palm wine, shine bobo, origin, whatever you can lay your hands, whether it's champagne or deco. I already have my Odeku, yeah. So Shola, please, you can go ahead, and so we can wrap up. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not going to take your time. I would like to make a toast to Amatoritsero Ede, or Bababado. That's what I call it. Ama is this wonderful person we have all gathered to celebrate tonight. It's nighttime where I am, that's why. Ama, we are celebrating you not only because you are a fine scholar who has made us think and rethink ideas about the politics of the contemporary, not just because you are one of Africa's finest poets, whose work also speaks to many discourses relating to our experience of the contemporary. We are celebrating you because you are a fine human being who is always ready to support and promote others. You don't suffer fools gladly, if I may say, and that's a good thing because you teach us to always stand up for ourselves and not to let people take advantage of us. You are a sounding board for many of us, me especially, a force of reason in precarious times and in good times. And your Ibadan wit I always find it quite uplifting when I need a few more laced with intelligence. Thank you for being you. Your best is yet to come, and may your days be filled with laughter. May the years ahead bring you joy, good health, and so. So please, let us fill our glass to Baba Badon.
Cheers.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Shola. This is my own coconut water.
This is my own chocolate drink.
See, that is the rascality in you. You couldn't even get a glass. You are drinking from the pali.
I didn't want to get up. No. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Shola Adeneko. Now we going to call on Kajetan. I know the celebration continues. We're going to leave the Zoom line still open, but we want to just formally bring the event to a close. So we'll be calling on Professor Kajetan Iheka to give us the closing remark and vote of thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Adiku. It's really been amazing to learn more about the man, the poet, the scholar. When we started with all the papers, I'm like, are we going to stick with the clean, polished armor, or are we going to go there? So I thank, Oga Adeshoko for taking us there, for opening up, allowing us to see the multi-dimensionality of the great human being, as Dr. Adenoko called him, that we've come to celebrate. As I was pondering about these closing remarks, I went back to the last encounter I had with Garuba was in Cape Town in summer of 2019. I had taken students, and we were getting our bearing right in a bar in Cape Town. And I think we spent half of our time, really not talking about ourselves, but talking about, the greatness and the generosity of Ama, which is something that I think has come up today, but as in, we haven't talked about so much. How even as, Ama, even as Harry passed on, the ways that I remember fondly how quietly Ama continues to support, Harry's project, and that is emblematic for me of the greatness of this human being that we have gathered to celebrate. Beyond the scholarship, which is brilliant, beyond this poetry, which is his really, truly original calling, and beyond, his social availability, his dependability and trust. So I really want to join, everybody who has said something today to say once again, thank you to Ama. In the different presentations, a different side of him came out, the philosopher, as Professor Eze, reminded us, the cultural historian, Professor Ugo's presentation today, the theorist of word making, in Dr. Bugi's keynote speech, but also the area boy, the Omota of Ibadan, who has been able to manage all these identities, all these attitudes, all these dispositions, without contradiction per se, really wearing all this cap very well. They don't make them like Ama as much. So we cherish what we have, and I hope this is only the beginning. This is the first 60 years. We look forward to at least another 60 years. With Ama, reading, celebrating, enjoying with you. To everybody who has gathered this afternoon, this morning, tonight, wherever from across the world, I think the geographical dispersal of everybody here reflects the globe-trotting sensibilities of Ama's work, but also his life. And I think for me, what I'm taking away this afternoon really is the need, for us to, live our best lives, as if, to live our best lives, to think about the ways, how we want to be remembered, how we want what people say about us, when called upon to give an account of our lives. I think, the accounting of Ama's life this afternoon has been very successful. It's a highly successful 60 years. How are we going to live our lives, I think, is one lesson that we hope we will take away from this. This is the beginning of a celebration, and I want to thank, Dr. Grace, who really got this celebration going, because we really don't do that. I'm thinking, next week I'm in Madison for the Tejumola Olaniyan lecture, and I realized that, well, it shouldn't be after passing. that will remember and think about, our heroes, our best friends, our icons. So thank you, Dr. Grace, for getting us started on this. And may we have many cause, many reasons to celebrate ourselves, in the coming years. The Yoruba say in your Lashotemi, and it's just really terrific to see the armor being garlanded by the clothes that we put on him this afternoon. I don't want to take much of your time, but I just want to close. Let's say thank you to Amatoritsero Ede for a terrific life, for a life worth living. To everybody who has spoken today, and for those who have celebrated him in silence, may we also be celebrated in our own ways, and may we have many occasions like this to celebrate ourselves. Let's go and continue to make good troubles, the kind that Dr. Ede continues to make in his life. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Kajetan.
Thank you very much,
you.
Dr. Kajetan.
So we can just...
Thank you. Uche, please, let's continue the celebration. I still have my wine going. Anybody else that wants to just, talk and, fraternize, we have the floor open. We can unmute ourselves now. If you have any music for Ama to dance.
Oh yeah, Ama, come on, dance, Joe.
Yes, can you give me some of your wine? It is only lemon juice I have.
So,
is it possible for you to...
Ama, I have my shekere here. Are you going to dance to my shekere?
What I can do is read poetry for you.
Dance to my shekere beat.
What I can do is to read poetry for you.
All right, let's go.
Because my dancing shoe is in Ibadan right now. I have to fly over to get it, and there's no time for that.
I can send you one by Uber.
So
no excuse. Just give me
I
your
can read
address.
from one of my collections.
So Godwin, you continued. So you still continued with your
Thank you so much.
everywhere.
Thank you, German.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for coming and for celebrating.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes.
I beg Dr. Shola Adeneko, send me Ghana Jollof.
I can read Caribbean blues.
That's another election.
So
arrange Ghana Jollof.
Natasha, thank you very much for coming. Yeah. So I saw you all the time, Natasha. Thank you. So I can read Caribbean blues. Where is the? I used to read poetry. Chielozona can attest to this. In Is Alone, that's where we first met. When we were doing this poetry, I used to read without books. I just
old age don't catch up with you now.
No, it's not that. It's scholarship. The prostitution with scholarship has taken me.
So you still don't want to admit that you are getting old because people are telling you you're getting young.
Old. Which guy old? I weightlifting everything.
Oga want dance you.
Oh my God.
No, I want to read.
Oga wants to dance you.
I don't start trouble. When I don't start,
you
have scared up the issue in Ama now.
So I'll read from this first collection, Caribbean. Okay. So it goes. This is about when love goes bust, right? So it says postcards scented with love, describing exotic Jamaica. Postcards, still careful artists, painting pictures of Bob Marley, immobilized forever in stone, plucking a tone-dead guitar, because he does not know the reggae of it. Pictures of gurgling brooks, of lakes of sunlight, of surf and sand, and nothing. Your photographs are all hidden away, but do not feel that I do not feel. It is the camera flash of your smile which blinds, and I must shutter my mind against the bright and the dark, bulletproof my soul against your flashbulb eyes. Do not feel that I do not feel, but those palm grooves of naked bodies, all that oil, all that ripeness, it is love shipwrecked in the sun, even though your name promises a plenitude. Like the blue waters of the bay, it is safe harbor for the seafaring gulls, or salt of life for the diver fish. Water, to flood the seaways to a harried heart. It is sea winds swaying the sad palms, eternal witnesses to many a drowning, even though he once said to the waves, no panic on the Titanic. Still, the Titanic sank, sitting still in the still blue silences of a dead seabed, deafened by the silent crash of talkative sea conches pressed against waterlogged ears that can no longer hear because life roars on. Up where the swordfish knives through the breakers. She went down amidst a menge of seaweed and flotsam, like a dead whale, belly up, belly aching the press of water. She sank amidst slimy, grimy, crawling things. She sank, fossilized upon the slimy bed of a slimy sea. At Montego Bay, island, shipwrecked in the sun. For this you fear the depths, but what fate awaits a champion swimmer except death by water? What fate for the lover but heartbreak at evening when the tropical sun bursts into a million gold ingots, breaking upon the slack fearful waves, hot faggots racing along the excited banks, with a kiss and a hiss, sinking heart and sky in darkness and ashes. Why do you stare so fixedly towards sea? What dazed sights did you see at the quay? Is it two sea nymphs at Ochorios, formed like bubbles, feeding each other shells, baiting among the foams, as naked as those nudist forms, lying lazy-limbed upon the sandy cove? No, that those two apparitions were you and I, for we were but bubbles upon the treasurer's crests, weathered together by a molecule of water, and are only together by clinging together, atomized on this reggae fall of waters. What fumes assailed you among the reefers? What sighs, what gnomes, what numbness? Amongst smoke giddy leaves, a demon horn appears, bright as an angel, teasing the hot lustful waves that makes you so swoon, making highs with your water-caught clams, clamming at the eye thighs. Fate, do not sway, rock steady, catch the sprays, and like Peter the rock, you shall meet God, wind, upon the bedsheets of water. Should you think me too obsessed with the wayward ways of water? Remember, we are all salt, all, and all our members do no other but all dissolve, limb for limb, only liquid, they grab at us without hands, at even tide when the hunter shark scavenges, running away with all our fins around runaway caves, with our bloody stillness, our upstreaming jaws, streaming red hate for all swimming things which feel. This is why, good Christians, we must hold hands with the waves, remembering Jonah, singing Hosanna before taking a final walk in the blue lagoon. It took only a captain's misunderstanding of a rocky canyon for harbor. It took the kingfisher's stubborn dalliance with a whirlpool to shatter the glass rough stillnesses. Nevertheless, said the proud swan to the lake, when I take a decision, it is fixed. Yet the fixed North Star to which the sunk bent prow bowed, sank with the stern, knocking the sea's bright scattered tip, all a-skittering over all this big bright white buck basin, and lost his keen all-compassing eye in the rocked ship's wrecked wake, forever forgoing the sun-kissed romance of the hulls. A mere pop star, popping for love with the bubbles breaking out of the open drowning ports, and no more turn to sexy starboard, port wide open port, wheel. On the west coast, the sun drops plop into the sea, driving your jealous mud skipper, crabbing this past 7 hopping summers for the hairy hole, holding bulging trousers, stung by the bees, because then he knows you must winter away. Follow the strong sweet streams periodically, hot, cold, hot. Follow where last season your towering hand, giddy behind the Ypsilon waterfalls, saw with closed eyes our own waters fall upon the paddles of one cheeky lifeguard, pleading, don't rock the boat, you should know where to hold, because strong streams, and dipping his paddles waist deep. Come on, one kiss, kissing inclusive, Jah Rastafari, kissing inclusive, because sometimes there are open spaces, he can swim behind because it is his private property and no space for her to hold because it is his private paddle, splitting the waves into two, where the weed police do not dare for fear of the piranhas. And there is not one honest bone in your body if you insist that you and I have not charted this same charged course before, one bamboo shoot ago, while the paddles played classical music, rough, smooth timbers, on the stalactites and stalagmites, hauling deep into the dark cave, wrapped around the riverbed in the dark, and come, do not break me so. The melanin in your eyes is iodine in my own. It stings, but clears all cataracts of vision. Seeing clearer, my vocation as a poem, upon which sight wrecks itself, but not the thin paper of your face, upon which I wreck and write myself, turning in upon rainbow bands, crystal clear, crystal hard radio waves clouding the head. Strange, mysterious frequencies, telegraphing strange voices from hot rose bushes along the wood paths of Jamaica, where the sinful baobab flourishes, chasing the reefs into the caves, black corrupting snakes crawling from hot nudist beaches along phallic paths, slowing their sinuous selves into the sinful holes to slake their thirst on a night of Eve. And the watchful bamboo on the avenues, making signs of the cross in shame, lisping, get out of those rags of careless passion and wasteful dust, out of that sunbathing mass, sun-tanning their lust, their rose bushes spread out in petals, grained with hair and oil, sweat and sand, decked out upon the beach head of waiting carousel, beached out of the rose bushes into the shade of my honest green healthy palms, no more breasting the shores with sexy dogs. For how long would you kneel like a child in prayer, awaiting a miracle on those far-dipped fields, teasing the blades of grass, testing the lushness of your bristly hairs, wondering if this degree of green fits the chlorophyll rasping in your blood, or if that shade of harvest brown measures the melanin of your botanical interest, forgetting that these same fields, the sea is its gardener, and the sun is orchard keeper, even though you did one before, of your keen, complicated gardening skills. What does the careful cricket whisper to the grasshopper in its hop hop? Beware, there are snakes on the island, dangerous snakes. Snakes in Ocho Rios, snakes in Montego Bay, snakes in 7 Mile, 7 feet tall, snakes in Kingston, ripe and fat with venom and patois, ready to bite. They bite the leaves, ruining the birth of a small flower. Beware, like the seedling fermenting in the earth, you must learn the slow salvation of patience, because every hardy tree reaching up to tap the sky tears itself up from tortured taproots. Beware, drop those vain lessons in botany and let things ripen into corn in ripe season. So, if a coconut falls third on your green turf, see it not as a careless gift from the Rasta god, who, wearing his Medusa head of snakes, he never plays Cupid on a West Indian range. At the knoll tops, you loan your body to sea breezes, screaming the island's favorite slogan. Share all your property, put your rumps in the hair, and rocking up your flower dress, the road he ripped where he had not seen, and ripped thoroughly, the carnival of leaves, sighing and moaning throughout the soft land, holding hands on Carnival Street, moved, swayed to the one love, Robert Nesta Marley foretold, gasping, jump to the right, jump to the left, bump your rumps in the hair, and the brooding sea jumped. The right-handed sheriff shot at the singing priest, who jumped a little too far to the left. Solemn, because tonight the sun withdraws a kiss, enraged by another tourist ship, bearing a plague of people to anchor down there between our lush warm skirts, down there where the men's mainmast anchor and the women's blood-wet boat bed. They seek their secret honey, dazed because there are a lot of emotions involved in getting to the rooftops, rumps to the right, rumps to the left, of Bob Marley Museum, where the biblical bee built its beehive, cheap for a few dirty Jamaican dollars, and any diseased tooth can suck into the sweet, clawing honeycombs and fall off from progressive K-rays. And did you not gasp, rumps in the hair, my gasper, swayed by one love, floating up there with the mystic bird, wings surrendered to the hairs, tendering your tender soul to the tender night, on dust stone smile paved roads, where ordinary men, all their extraordinarily hard life, search for a name to give to things. Birds dressed for carnival, tweeting among the treetops. Oh, but it was one breeze too brash, and the hills could not withstand such a blow. Pus upon Jamaica, ass in the air. Oh, Babylon, in what harbors do you rig your ships? Where? In what hangars do you fuel your planes or refuel your loins and fire your propeller lost? Remember the lot, and of Lot's spoiled bride who became a pillar of salt. Where do you plot your pleasure trips? Who are your trouble agents, offering all-inclusive travel packages, kissing inclusive? For bored housewives behind the waterfalls, making cuckolds of adventuring husbands. Remember Sodom, who was once rich and rotten like you? Or funky rollicking Gomorrah, named for Gono and the pox? Where are your flaming red light districts, selling hot assorted one-blow meat, protected by the joy police of state? The plague this time, because your cosmetic rubber sheet is stretched about to burst, and spill goo and skunk upon the ocean floor. Environmental hazard for the little trusting fish, who views your escaped tadpoles for brother fishes, little knowing that the new civilized plague is spreading, that the game is up, and your rubber full. Sorry for the long read. I just felt I should give you the full gist of it. And there are lots of phallic images there. I don't know if you got it.
Yes.
Yeah, lots of mischief in that point.
Are you a poet of the phallus?